Hey everyone, today I'm going to be tying up a No See Um Midge pattern. This is a dry fly tied up like a hackle stacker. Lately I have been out on the Middle Provo absolutely crushing fish on this pattern. And it's a great pattern to fish for all sorts of different hatches. You'll see the midge pattern here that I'm tying. It doesn't have any tail, but you can tie it in a bunch of different sizes and colors, add a tail, and you've got a sweet mayfly imitation, whether you want to tie a blue-winged olive version or a PMD version. This here just happens to be the midge version. Typical of most of the patterns I use, it's a super easy, super simple fly pattern to tie. Two materials, we're going to have thread and hackle. If you add a tail, then you got, three different materials. So it's a relatively simple fly in the number of materials. It is a little tough to tie because of that hackle stacker. As far as learning this technique, the best thing you can do is just keep practicing, and pretty soon you'll have it pretty dialed. So we're starting out right now with a Daiichi 1110 hook in a size 22. I usually fish these in 18s to about 22s. It's a great standard dry fly hook. I'm a big fan of them. I like the straight eye on them. For the thread, we're going to be using some Vivus Fortino in black. I like to go with super small thread. It makes it a lot easier to not crowd the head, and on tiny flies it helps a lot with that. So we're going to go ahead and start the thread, and we're going to start at about the halfway point. Just go back, trim right there, and then go back to the bend of the hook and go up again to that halfway point. Okay, so there we've got our body. We're a good chunk of the way done with the fly pattern. Now we're going to do the hackle stacker portion of this fly, and this is where this fly gets a little tough. If you've never done a hackle stacker, basically what we're going to do here is make a parachute post using the thread, and we're going to do that by placing our finger up above the hook and wrapping the thread around the finger. My finger's going to end up out of the frame, but you'll kind of see how I wrap the thread around that finger. So we're going to do that, tie in a hackle, go up and around, and then we'll pull that thread over top of the fly, and that's how you'll get that hackle just right on the top, flaring up, no hackle on the bottom. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to do one wrap onto my finger, right there, right there, and then I'm going to do one wrap in front of that, just to kind of hold it in place. Then I'm going to do another wrap. Sorry, I'm just making it the right height. I like to be about an inch off the hook shank with my finger. Then we're going to do a third one, lock it down, and then with my other hand, I use that same hand, my finger's up here out of the frame, then I use the same hand to grab that thread and wrap it around. I rotate it between each hand a couple times. Boom. Okay. So I've kind of got that locked down. Now I'm going to grab my hackle stem in the appropriate size. You can do it a little bit bigger. You can use a hackle gauge to measure, or you can make sure that just those fibers end up being about a hook gap, just like that. Kind of tough to see. Sorry, I'm holding my finger up there. So I'm going to trim some off the stem there while holding that thread with that finger. It's a little bit of a hassle to do it basically with one hand. I've got one fiber stuck that does not want to come off. Come on. There we go. Now I'm going to do a couple wraps ahead of it just to have a nice thread base where I'm going to tie that feather in. So with that same hand that's holding the thread up here, I'm going to hold that fiber, put the stem on the same side of the hook as me, and lock it down. Okay? Just a couple locking wraps. Then I'm going to rotate between my two hands and wrap that hackle up that thread. And you're gonna eyeball it to be about a slightly shorter for the rest of the way up to the hook, because we're gonna pull this over. You'll see what I mean here in a second. You'll notice I don't use hackle pliers. They're just too tough to use on this because you're wrapping around that post. So I'm grabbing that, and then I'm gonna wrap down. I'm gonna let go of it because I'm using a tiny feather off of a cape. And I'm doing this in grizzly. Color doesn't really matter too much. So I've got it down. Now I'm gonna rotate it over into my hand that's got the finger up with the thread, and then I'm gonna lock it down with my thread using my other hand. Now at this point, I've got it locked down. I can let go of that loop with that finger. That finger's now loose. Now I'm gonna go in, and this gets tough on these smaller sizes, and trim that tip off and all the little fibers that are around it. Boom. I've got some crowding the eyes, so I'm going to push it up with my fingernail and trim those guys out. We're going to cover the rest of them with the thread, and you'll notice the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this thread, pull it back, and I'm going to just finish the thread up towards the front. Now, I'm going to grab with my right hand this thread right here, and I'm going to brush the hackle back towards the back of the hook, because this hackle's basically all going to be sitting on top of the hook. We kind of want it in a nice, almost wedge on the back side of that thread, if you can see that. Then I'm going to pull that down, that thread, and then I'm going to pull it tight and lock it down. Do one wrap in front, well, 2 wraps on each side of that thread. Then as close as I can, I'm going to trim what's left of that parachute post, quote unquote. Not really a parachute post, but kind of. I've got that little frayed top. I'm just going to try and tie it down best I can. Cover it up, cover up my mistakes because I'm a bad tire. And then whip finish. And right there, you've got a No See Um Midge. You'll see I got that Hackle Stacker top right there, thread body. It'd be a great trico imitation if you go ahead and add some tails. Like I said, you can add tails and do it in different colors and sizes for all sorts of different mayflies. But for the winter midge hatches, it has been a killer pattern for me. So go out and give it a whirl on your local water where you got some midges hatching.